Derek splashed mud water on a pregnant woman standing outside the tower where he was about to close the biggest deal of his life. A $10 billion deal, and he laughed as she stumbled back, drenched and shaking, because to him she was nobody. But that pregnant woman was his ex-wife, Elena. The same woman he'd thrown out years ago when she carried his child and begged him to stay. And what Derek didn't know, what he couldn't have known as he strolled into that boardroom straightening his tie, was that Elena was now married to the billionaire whose signature he needed, the silent powerhouse behind his entire $10 billion deal. By the time Derek reached his car, the deal was dead. His company was finished. One splash of mud water had cost him everything. But how did the woman he discarded end up married to the most powerful man in the room? What did that billionaire see on the screen that made him tear up a $10 billion contract without a single word? And when Elena finally locked eyes with the man who ruined her, now begging at her feet, would she remember every cruel thing he did, or had she already moved so far beyond him that he no longer mattered at all? It was raining that morning. Not hard, just enough to leave dirty puddles along the curb outside the glass tower that touched the clouds. Elena stood near the entrance, one hand resting gently on her round belly, the other holding a small paper bag. She had come to bring her husband his forgotten reading glasses before his big meeting. She smiled to herself, thinking how he always lost things when he was nervous. Then a black car came racing toward the curb, too fast, tires hissing through the water. Elena barely had time to look up. The wave of cold, filthy mud water hit her like a slap. It soaked her coat, her hair, her face. She gasped and stumbled backward, clutching her belly, her heart pounding with the shock of it. And through the car window, she heard laughter. Derek stepped out, shaking a single drop off his polished shoe, looking at her the way a man looks at a stain. "Watch where you stand next time," he said, his voice dripping with the same coldness she remembered from years ago. He didn't recognize her. Or maybe he simply didn't care to. To him, she was just a wet, clumsy woman in his way. He buttoned his expensive jacket, checked his reflection in the tower's glass doors, and walked inside without looking back. Elena stood frozen on the wet pavement, trembling, but not from the cold. She knew that voice. She knew that walk. She knew the cruel little smile that never reached his eyes. For a moment, the years peeled away, and she was 24 again, pregnant and terrified, standing in the doorway of a tiny apartment, begging the same man not to leave. She could still hear his words from that night, sharp as broken glass. "You're dead weight, Elena. I'm going somewhere in life, and you're not coming with me." She could still feel the way the door had slammed, the way the silence had swallowed her whole, the way she had slid down the wall and cried until there was nothing left inside her. She had been 8 months pregnant then, alone, broke, abandoned, and now here he was, splashing mud on her like she was nothing, on the very morning of the biggest day of his life. But something was different now. Elena wasn't that broken girl anymore. She looked down at her ruined coat, then up at the tower, her husband's tower, and slowly, quietly, she breathed out. Her hands stopped shaking. A strange calm settled over her, the kind of calm that comes not from weakness, but from strength that has been earned through years of pain. She wiped the mud from her cheek with the back of her hand and whispered to herself, "You have no idea who you just did that to." Inside the tower, Derek rode the elevator up to the 40th floor, feeling like a king. Today was the day everything changed. His struggling company was about to sign a partnership with the most powerful and secretive investor in the country. A man no one ever saw, a billionaire who worked through lawyers and screens and never showed his face. $10 billion. Derek had chased this deal for 2 years. He had lied, clawed, and stepped on anyone in his path to get here. And now the finish line was one signature away. He straightened his tie in the elevator's mirror, grinning at himself. "You made it," he whispered. "You finally made it." He never once thought about the woman outside. Why would he? She was just an accident on the sidewalk. A nobody, a puddle splash forgotten before the doors even closed. But high above him, in a quiet office at the very top of the tower, a phone buzzed softly on a wide glass desk. A tall man in a dark suit picked it up. His name was Adrian Cole, the silent billionaire, the man behind the deal, the man whose signature the whole world wanted. On the screen was a live feed from the security camera at the tower's entrance. Adrian watched it once, then again. His jaw tightened. His eyes, calm and unreadable a moment before, turned to ice. Because the woman on that screen, the pregnant woman drenched in mud, standing tall even as she trembled, was not a stranger to him. She was his wife. She was his whole world. And the man who had just laughed and walked away from her was, according to the papers on Adrian's desk, the very man he was about to make rich beyond his wildest dreams. Adrian slowly set the phone down. He looked at the thick contract in front of him. 2 years of work, $10 billion, one signature away. Then he reached for his pen, but not to sign. Before we continue, if this story is gripping you already, do me a quick favor. My ex-husband once told me I'd never make it to 5,000 subscribers on this channel. Prove him wrong with me. Hit subscribe and tap that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Now back to Derek and Elena. Derek walked into the boardroom like he owned the building. 30 floors of glass and steel, and every inch of it felt like it belonged to him now. His team was already seated, nervous, sweating, straightening papers for the 10th time. 2 years of work sat on that table in one thick folder. $10 billion. One signature away. He shook hands. He smiled his big, practiced smile. He sat at the head of the table like a man who had already won. "Where's Mr. Cole?" someone whispered. "He never shows his face for the first part," another whispered back. "Lawyers handle everything until the final signing. That's just how he operates." Derek smirked. He liked that. A billionaire so powerful he didn't even need to be in the room. Soon Derek thought, I'll be just like him. Untouchable. Faceless. Feared. He had no idea the very man he admired was, at that exact moment, standing in a private elevator with his hand clenched so tightly around a phone that the glass screen had cracked under his palm. Adrian Cole did not run into rooms. He did not raise his voice. In 15 years of building his empire, no one had ever seen him lose control. But right now, watching that video loop over and over in his mind, his pregnant wife, stumbling backward, drenched, humiliated, laughed at, something inside him had gone very quiet and very dangerous. He remembered the night he met Elena. 3 years ago, in a small diner on the edge of the city, working a second job as a waitress to save for a baby that never got to see its first birthday. Back when she had nothing but her dignity and her tired, kind eyes. He remembered how she refused his help for months, too proud to accept charity from a stranger, until he finally convinced her he simply wanted to know her, not save her. He remembered the day she told him about her past in a whisper, staring at her hands. A husband who left her pregnant and broke. A man who called her dead weight and slammed the door on 8 months of promises. Adrian had held her that night while she cried, and he had made a quiet promise to himself. No one would ever make her feel small again. Now, riding down in that elevator, contract folder tucked under his arm, Adrian understood something the entire boardroom upstairs did not yet know. The man waiting to sign his $10 billion deal was the same man who had broken his wife. The elevator doors opened. Derek was mid-sentence, laughing at his own joke, when the room went silent. Adrian Cole stepped in. He was younger than the rumors suggested, calm the way a locked door is calm, wearing a suit so simple it looked expensive precisely because it didn't try to be. He didn't sit. He didn't shake a single hand. He placed his phone on the table, screen facing up, and pressed play. The boardroom watched the security footage in confused silence. A woman in the rain, a black car, a wave of mud, laughter through a window. Derek's laughter from the video echoed through the very room he now sat in. His stomach dropped. "Do you recognize her?" Adrian asked quietly. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Derek blinked at the screen, at the woman stumbling back in the mud, and something cold crawled up his spine. He knew that face. He knew it from 1,000 nights he tried to forget. That's... His mouth went dry. "That's not possible." "Her name is Elena," Adrian said, and every word landed like a stone dropped into still water. "She is my wife. She is 8 months pregnant with our first child." And this morning, on her way to bring me something I forgot, a man in a rush to sign a $10 billion deal decided she wasn't worth slowing down for. The room did not breathe. Derek's team turned to stare at him, the color draining from every face at the table. "I didn't know," Derek stammered, gripping the edge of the table. "I swear, I didn't recognize her. You knew her once," Adrian said, cutting through him like glass. "Well enough to leave her pregnant and alone. Well enough to call her dead weight. I know the whole story, Derek. She told me everything, a long time before I ever became your business partner's investor. I just never told her your name meant anything to me, because I didn't know it would ever cross paths with hers again." Derek's face went white. "This deal," Adrian continued, closing the folder in front of him with a soft, final click, "was never really about your company. I wanted to see who you'd become. Now I know." He turned toward the door. "Wait," Derek said, standing so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Please, this deal. My company, my employees, everything depends on this." Adrian paused at the door, not even turning around. "You should have thought about who depends on you," he said, "before you laughed at a pregnant woman in the rain." And then he walked out. The boardroom exploded into panic. Phones ringing, papers shuffling, someone already whispering about lawsuits and stock prices. But Derek didn't hear any of it. He stood frozen, staring at the closed door, his ears ringing, his entire future collapsing in the span of 60 seconds. He ran down the hallway, past his stunned assistant, into the elevator, punching the button over and over as if speed could undo what had already been done. His reflection in the mirrored walls looked like a stranger, pale, shaking, unraveling. By the time the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, his phone was already buzzing nonstop. Emails, calls, his board, his investors, the deal dead, public, everywhere. He stumbled out into the same rain that had fallen that morning, chasing his own car through the same puddle where, hours earlier, a woman he once called worthless had stood soaked and shaking while he laughed. He never saw her face clearly then. He would never forget it now. Derek stood in the rain outside the tower, his phone buzzing against his ribs like something alive and furious. 50 missed calls, 100 messages. His board wanted answers. His biggest investor had just walked away, and with him $10 billion, 3,000 jobs, and every promise Derek had made to keep his company standing. But none of that was what made his hands shake. It was her face. He kept seeing it. Not the woman on the security footage, drenched and stumbling, but the girl she used to be. 24 years old, standing in the doorway of their old apartment, 8 months pregnant, begging him not to go. He remembered how she had reached for his sleeve, how her voice had cracked when she said his name, how he had shrugged her hand off like she was nothing more than a coat he no longer wanted to wear. He had told himself for years that he did the right thing, that she would have held him back, that a man chasing greatness couldn't carry the weight of a family too. Now he understood the truth. He hadn't outgrown her. He had thrown away the one person who ever loved him for free and traded her for a life that had just crumbled to dust in one boardroom. He got in his car, hands trembling on the wheel, and drove without knowing where he was going. The city blurred past the windshield, gray and wet and indifferent. Somewhere in that blur, his phone rang one more time. His lawyer's name flashed on the screen. "It's over," the voice on the other end said flatly. "Cole pulled every investment tied to your name. Not just this deal, all of them. Nobody in this city will touch your company now." "I'm sorry, Derek." The phone slipped from his hand and landed on the passenger seat, still glowing, still buzzing, but Derek didn't reach for it again. He pulled over on a quiet street and sat there in silence, the rain drumming softly on the roof, and for the first time in 15 years, Derek cried. Not because he lost $10 billion, because somewhere along the way, chasing money and power and rooms that would never truly love him back, he had become a man who could laugh at a pregnant woman drowning in mud and feel nothing at all. He thought of his unborn child, the one he never met, the one Elena had lost weeks after he left her, alone in a hospital room with no one beside her. He hadn't even known until years later, from a mutual friend who mentioned it in passing like old news. He remembered feeling a flicker of guilt back then, and burying it fast the way he buried everything that made him uncomfortable. That guilt was not flickering now. It was burning. Weeks passed. Derek's company collapsed exactly the way everyone predicted. Employees walked out with boxes under their arms. His name became a warning whispered in boardrooms across the city. The man who lost a $10 billion deal over one careless second. Reporters loved the story. They called it karma. They called it justice. Some even found out about Elena's past with him. And the story spread even faster, dragging his name through every headline like mud through a gutter. Derek stopped answering his phone. He stopped shaving. He sat in an apartment far smaller than the one he used to call beneath him, staring at the walls, replaying that morning again and again, wondering what would have happened if he had simply slowed the car down. One gray afternoon, months later, he found himself standing outside a small hospital, not knowing exactly why his feet had carried him there. Through the glass doors, he saw a familiar face. Older now, softer, wrapped in a warm coat, holding a tiny bundle close to her chest. Elena. She was leaving the maternity ward, a newborn baby girl sleeping peacefully in her arms, and beside her walked Adrian, one hand resting protectively on her back, his eyes scanning the world around her the way a man watches over something precious. Derek froze on the sidewalk, half hidden behind a parked car, watching a life he could have had, should have fought for, belonging now to someone else. Elena looked up, and for one long moment, their eyes met across the wet pavement. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She didn't even look angry. She simply looked at him the way someone looks at a storm that has already passed. Something that once had the power to hurt her, but no longer could. Derek opened his mouth, wanting to say sorry, wanting to explain, wanting some small piece of forgiveness to hold on to. But no words came out. What could he possibly say to a woman he had once called dead weight? Now walking away cradling a healthy, happy daughter, beside a man who had built an empire and still knelt down every day to tie her shoes when her belly grew too big to bend. Elena gave him the smallest nod, not of forgiveness, not of anger, just quiet acknowledgement that he existed and no longer mattered. And then she turned and walked into the sunlight breaking through the clouds, her husband's arm wrapped gently around her shoulders. Derek stood there long after they disappeared into their car, rain mixing with something warmer on his cheeks, finally understanding the weight of what he had thrown away that morning in the mud. Some deals are lost with a signature. Others are lost the moment we decide another human being isn't worth our kindness. If you were Elena in that final moment, seeing the man who broke you standing broken himself, would you have said something to him, or would you have simply walked away like she did?